too late for regret. James had always been the kind of guy who believed that life would simply work out. He didn't think much about the future, never really worried about the consequences of his actions. And for a long time, that mentality had worked out for him. At least, it seemed that way, until the day everything changed. He had met Tasha in secondary school. She was smart, kind-hearted, and beautiful, a combination that made her stand out in a sea of faces. James was the charming, popular guy in school, and it didn't take long for the two of them to become inseparable. They were young, carefree, and in love. Or at least, James thought they were. Their relationship had lasted through the years. After secondary school, they both went to different universities, but they stayed together, navigating the ups and downs of growing up. There were fights, makeups, moments of doubt, and times of pure happiness. But through it all, they were together, until the unexpected happened. Once evening, Tasha came to James, her face pale and anxious. She hesitated before speaking, but when she did, the words hit James like a punch to the gut. "I'm pregnant, James," she said, her voice trembling. For a moment, James stood frozen, the weight of her words settling in. He didn't know how to respond. Tasha looked at him, searching for reassurance, for something, anything, that would give her hope. But James, with his ever-present carelessness, didn't know what to say. The words that came out of his mouth were far from comforting. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice lacking any real emotion. "Yes, James," Tasha said, her voice breaking. "I'm sure." "What are we going to do?" But James, who had always been focused on his own needs and desires, only thought of his future and the complications this pregnancy would bring. He was young, not ready for the responsibilities of fatherhood. Deep down, he feared the idea of being tied down, of giving up his carefree life. I don't know if I'm ready for this," he said, his voice uncertain, but also detached. "I never planned for this, Tasha." The words were like a slap in the face to Tasha, but she tried to stay calm. She had loved James with all her heart. She had believed in their future together. She never imagined that the man she had been with for so many years, the one she had shared her life with, would turn his back on her when she needed him the most. "I need you, James," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do alone." But James wasn't listening. He had already made up his mind. "I can't do this," he repeated, more firmly now. "I'm not ready." "You're on your own, Tasha." And with that, he walked away. Tasha was left devastated. Alone, pregnant, and heartbroken, she had to face the harsh reality of her situation. She had loved James with everything she had, and now he was gone. She struggled through the months of pregnancy, working hard to save money, to make sure she could provide for the child she was carrying. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom she named Noah, and although she was exhausted and overwhelmed, she loved him with all her heart. In the years that followed, Tasha raised Noah on her own. She had no support from James, and she couldn't bring herself to even think about him. He had abandoned her when she needed him the most, and she had learned to move on without him. Her son was everything to her, and she made sure he knew that he was loved. As time passed, Tasha met another man, Daniel. He was kind, patient, and understanding. He loved Noah as his own, and Tasha finally felt like she could breathe again. She wasn't alone anymore. Daniel was there for her, and he loved her and her son unconditionally. Together, they built a family, and Noah thrived in the love and care of two people who truly valued him. James, on the other hand, moved on with his life. He started working in a promising job and eventually married a woman named Claire. They had a beautiful home, and Claire soon became pregnant with their first child. James was overjoyed by the news. For the first time, he was about to become a father, and he felt a surge of pride and excitement. But then, one day, as he was spending time with Claire, a thought crossed his mind. It wasn't something he had thought about in years, but it suddenly felt like a punch in the stomach. What about Noah? His son, the one he had abandoned all those years ago. He had a child now with Claire, but Noah, his flesh and blood, was out there, somewhere, and he had never once made an effort to be part of his life. The guilt that had been buried deep inside him began to resurface. James knew he had been a coward. He knew he had made the wrong choice. But it was too late. His son had grown up without him, and he had no right to suddenly barge into their lives. Or so he thought, until he got the news that Noah had been in trouble at school. He tried to reach out, to find out what had happened, but it was Tasha who had always kept Noah away from him. Finally, after much pleading from his wife, James decided he needed to act. He hired a lawyer and filed for custody of Noah, determined to right his wrongs, no matter the cost. He convinced himself that he was doing it for Noah's sake, that he was finally going to be the father his son deserved. Tasha was shocked when the court summons arrived. She had moved on, built a new life, and she had no intention of letting James back into Noah's life. Not after what he had done. She knew that Noah had a father in Daniel, someone who loved him, cared for him, and was there for him every single day. The day of the court hearing came, and James was filled with nerves. He had no idea what to expect. But he was determined to fight for what he thought was right. He thought he could simply walk into Noah's life and take his place as the father. But what he didn't understand was the bond that had already formed between Noah and Daniel. The courtroom was tense as Tasha took the stand, explaining how James had abandoned her and their son. She spoke with conviction, with a mother's love, and with the knowledge that she had done everything in her power to raise Noah to be a good, happy, and loved child. Daniel, too, took the stand, recounting how he had loved Noah as his own, how they were a family, and how James had never once tried to be a part of it. James, on the other hand, tried to explain his regret, his newfound desire to be a father, but his words sounded hollow. The judge listened carefully, but the evidence was clear. Tasha had moved on. Noah had found a father in Daniel. And James had, in every sense, forfeited his right to be a part of his son's life. When the judge made her ruling, it was clear. The custody of Noah would remain with Tasha and Daniel. James's plea was denied. The courtroom was silent as he stood there, stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened. As he left the courthouse, James felt a deep emptiness inside him. He had wanted to be a father, but it was too late. His son had already found a father in someone else, someone who had been there for him, loved him, and cared for him when James had chosen to walk away. And in that moment, James realized something he had never understood before: sometimes, love cannot be claimed when it has already been given to someone else.